I will talk to you about progress, about innovation. However, when we talk about innovation, we must start from the assumption that the difficulty when something new arrives is not in believing in new things, but the difficulty lies in abandoning the old ones, which are often our habits, our ways of doing things. Today, saying it is done this way because it has always been done this way means being out of touch. When we talk about innovation, moreover, we must also remember that today's obvious was always yesterday's impossible. If I had come before you 15 years ago and told you, look, one day inside your cars there will be male and female voices that you will choose, guiding you to your destination by saying go right, go left. At the roundabout, take the second exit, the destination is on your right, you have arrived. You would have said, impossible. If today that navigator doesn't take us to our destination as we want, we complain to the navigator because it's obvious, it exists, so it must also work. I say it's obvious, my foot. It's obvious because someone thought of it, designed it, and works every day to try to make it perfect. And this is always a human being, a man or a woman. You see, man has always overcome great difficulties and solved major problems with great discoveries. So much so that he discovers fire, then discovers the wheel, then discovers writing. Centuries later, he also makes a great revolution, the Industrial Revolution. Then comes the Digital Revolution. All these great revolutions, these great discoveries have one characteristic: change, which is the constant in our lives. And what does change generate? Above all, change generates the future. It generates what the trends of the future will be. And now, I want to talk to you about what the trends of the coming years will be. Well, certainly demography is the first, the global economy, geopolitics, energy, technology, and innovation. But let's start with the first, demography, which is the driver that moves everything. What is demography? Well, it represents global demand. People who demand goods and services from an economic system that must produce them, generating profits and losses that the financial system will record over time. Well, how has demography evolved over time? Well, in the meantime, we can say that at this very moment, as I am speaking to you, we are 7,954,769,788, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93 people, despite wars, despite pandemics. There is one characteristic in history. The world population has always grown, and those who exist have always evolved. So the question exists, but it generates an economy that is literally changing. I want to give you an example because I could talk to you about many things, but at this very moment, each of you here or those listening to us can make an online purchase in Italy. But one must realize that perhaps the payment system is American, and I am buying a product that is manufactured in China, which is then transported from China to Europe by a Danish company to a Dutch port, and then a Singaporean company brings it from the Netherlands to Italy. And finally, a German company delivers it to our doorstep. This is the reflection and what it means to be global. It means that even if I don't want to be, I am in an interconnected world. And geopolitics, is doing everything to transform. It is transforming, but to understand what geopolitics is, I need to understand the world we live in. Well, we live in a world where, first of all, 45% of the population has yellow skin, 20% has white skin, while 20% has mixed race skin, and 15% has black skin. In this world of over 7,900,000,000 people, there are 195 countries, 114 languages are spoken, 10 religions are practiced, but 49 of these 195 countries are currently at war. And in these countries, 1.5 billion people live. 780 million people do not have drinking water at home. 16% of the world's population does not speak, is not educated, is illiterate. 20% of the GDP is in the hands of 20% of the people hold 80% of the wealth. However, 5 billion 200 million people have internet access. And by the end of the year, it will be 7. And then someone might say, but it's just a technology. Certainly. But it's an enabling driver. Because when the internet arrives, something immediately happens to the world geography. The world that night, when that gentleman turns on that technology and makes it available to everyone, moves a lever from position A to position B. And this happens. Borders disappear. Before being from Modena, Emilia, Italy, Europe, we became citizens of the world. Today we can interact, socialize, educate ourselves, do business, and work for any entity from anywhere in the world, without data, without borders, and often for free. So the internet is not a technology, it is a new world that has accompanied an old world. However, a world that has another major issue, the issue of climate. And when we talk about climate, the word sustainability is often associated with it. However, for sustainability to be tangible, it's obvious that there must be environmental sustainability. But there must also be economic, social, and entrepreneurial sustainability. Otherwise, it remains a mere illusion. Here, I would like to give you some examples, because while some people talk, there are others who quietly solve problems, always a man or a woman. CO2 emissions are being reduced on one hand, and on the other hand, there are companies that are building systems to capture CO2. There are companies that are producing fertilizers so that the soil can capture CO2. There are companies that are working on food waste. It is said that there is not enough food for everyone. That's not true. There is plenty. It's just that on one side it is wasted, and on the other side there is none. And thanks to the internet, this supply and demand are being connected. And this issue will disappear much faster than we think. But there is another very important aspect, the aspect of cultivation. We have discovered the importance of the land with this pandemic, of cultivating. Vertical farms are emerging. Vertical cultivation that no longer exploits land, but uses vertical systems and achieves a different result. Because where is food normally produced? In the outskirts in the countryside. But the concentration of people is predominantly in the cities. And so we talk about 0 kilometer. But how is it possible? 0 kilometer is possible because we have thousands of dilapidated buildings that can be converted within the cities into these realities. And some are already doing it. These realities are already being built. The other major driver, the other major megatrend, as mentioned earlier, is energy. When asked, what is the most important thing for a human being's life? The answer is always health, and I think that's obvious. But do we realize that without energy, even health is at risk today? A hospital doesn't function. A means of transport doesn't work. Nothing works. And so, talking about energy means paying great attention to renewables, and renewables come in various forms. Certainly, work is also being done on nuclear fusion, which by 2050 should be, according to plans, industrialized and available to everyone. Here are great changes that break down boundaries, but it is always a human being who makes this change. Then technology is another great driver. What is the technology? It is an enabler of all this. It is now part of our lives. What are the technologies that will impact our lives the most in the future? Well, certainly artificial intelligence, 3D printing, robotics, mixed reality, and human interface. However, alongside opportunities, there are always problems. Life is like a medal. And so, cybersecurity companies are emerging to make these products and devices secure. Blockchain to certify all of this, and today, there is also talk of the metaverse. What is the metaverse? A word that everyone says. But then it's hard to understand what it is. Well, you see, I simplify it a lot. People can read content, watch content, listen to content, or be the content within the content. It's a new world that is being created, which cannot be ignored. Because already today, in 2022, 400 million people are engaging with it. All of this generates innovation. What is innovation for me? For me, it is simply the answer to a question that people, men and women, often ask themselves in times of difficulty. What question do people ask themselves when they face a difficulty? How do I solve this problem? When the answer to that question comes, it will always be something innovative. But then, that innovation must inevitably transform into progress. And it does so when that innovation reaches the hands of ordinary people, improving their lives. So, I like to say that we are currently facing, even if we don't see it, a new renaissance. A new renaissance, however, determined by over 7,900,000,000 people. Because never before have so many people been asking questions to solve big problems. And the answers are already coming. This is having faith in the future. Not believing in something esoteric, but believing in the human being. Why? Because the future will be green. And here I want to give you examples of innovation. GREEN is an acronym that stands for genetics, robotics, internet, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnologies, which are permeating every sector of our life. Quantum technology is entering computers and generating quantum computers that are much faster than traditional computers. Beyond processing data, they are capable of generating new scenarios. And thus they will further change every sector. But the innovators are not only overseas, we also have them here in Italy. Consider this. It's a beautiful story of a mechanical engineer from Brescia who, thanks to the integration with nanotechnologies, develops the greatest innovation in the construction field of the last century. A 2-centimeter plaster that makes a house earthquake resistant up to 2.5 G. Think about it. The earthquake in L'Aquila was N50. So it means that with a plaster, I make the house earthquake resistant to a quake. 3 times that of L'Aquila. And if the house is damaged by an earthquake, in the case of L'Aquila, 65% of the uninhabitable houses today did not collapse. To be able to return inside within a week, you plaster it and make it habitable. This is a revolution. Not just an innovation, it's also a sustainable revolution. And another Italian company developed over time, 7 years ago, a paint with the ability to capture atmospheric pollutants. But in the midst of the pandemic, faced with a major problem, they broke through and went beyond a boundary. With the University of Florence, they made a modification. And today, this paint has a great antibacterial capacity. Soon we will be able to paint our cars, hospitals, schools, homes, and public transport with this paint, making it much more difficult for bacteria and therefore also viruses to proliferate. But then, you see, during the pandemic, many people became concerned about health. Genetics has made a giant leap forward. Today, sequencing a person's human genome costs less than $1,000 and allows us to tackle and approach diseases from a completely different perspective. But then, often, innovations come from cross-contamination with other sectors. Think about it in the military sector. The American Army commissioned a company to build an exoskeleton to capture bin Laden in Pakistan. This company did it. Then this exoskeleton was slightly modified, and today it helps disabled people regain mobility. Alice, a 16-year-old Italian girl, wore this exoskeleton for the first time on July 21st, 2019. She would have had a life only in a wheelchair, and she took her first steps. And here I would be inclined to ask, but is this technology? Ask Alice. So I entered with an exoskeleton that is instead adapted for the working world. Thanks to this exoskeleton, by activating it, I gain strength in my hands or legs to perform heavy operations. But why did I enter with this exoskeleton? To convey just one concept, that when you integrate the machine with the human, there is no machine or human being, that can beat this combination. This is the winning combination. Then, another important aspect is that during the pandemic, telemedicine gained traction and finally accelerated. Today, thanks to a smartphone and an internet connection, we are able to monitor our blood pressure, measure our heart rate, check our moles, keep track of our respiratory capacity, monitor our oxygen levels, weigh ourselves, check our temperature, monitor our blood sugar levels, and even perform an ultrasound remotely. This is not science fiction. It already exists today. But then, an Italian company takes many of these sensors, incorporates them into a shirt, and in addition to monitoring these parameters, this shirt is capable of providing a 12-lead electrocardiogram in real time. This is not just technology. This is a lifesaver. Like a lifesaver, there is a robot developed by an Italian abroad, given an entirely Italian name, Da Vinci. Because robotic surgery is the future, as it is much more precise, much less invasive, and above all, self-learning. Imagine, here it is peeling a grape. And since it peels the grape so precisely that it doesn't break the skin, it is reattaching it and giving it stitches. But the most incredible thing is what you don't see, because the grape was in Trento and Dr. Giulianotti was operating on it from Los Angeles. The first remote surgeries are beginning. This is not just magic. This is not just opportunity. It is sustainability. The journeys of hope to find the best doctor will end. I can stay in my own country. And you see, reality can be viewed in many ways as something impossible that will never happen, or as something that, if I make it happen, can happen. Well, if we are facing the greatest industrial reconversion, we can also say, because all this is generated by someone who is thinking about it, that we are not facing the same professional regeneration. I maintain that one should never stop learning, because otherwise you quickly become obsolete. I conducted a study on what the jobs of the future are, and after doing it, I threw it away. Why? Because no one can predict the future. And then I believe it's not even interesting. I think it's more interesting to understand what skills are needed to do these jobs. And I defined them in the 5 I's, where the first I, evidently, is that each of us must know something about information technology, because otherwise you won't get anywhere. Paradoxically, even in the midst of a pandemic, a grandfather couldn't communicate with his family. So it's also a matter of freedom. Then in this world without data, without borders, but above all without barriers, you need a master key. And we must realize that I didn't decide it, it's English. And then there's the third I. The third I is very important, because precisely in the era of information technology, in the era of artificial intelligence, in the era of robots, just as I need water in the desert because it's not there, in the era of these technologies, I will need the third I, emotional intelligence, meaning real human beings. Not those who do things that machines do better and at a lower cost, but those who bring into play the unique characteristics that a machine and artificial intelligence can never have. Consciousness, the ability to create. And all this, consequently, generates the fourth IR, which in my opinion is somewhat the one that generates everything, the fourth I. I conducted a study that discovered nothing but consider that the world's leading companies today, the largest ones, did not exist 30 years ago. They were all built by young people who were under 30 years old. None of these young people were privileged or from wealthy families. Unfortunately, 95% are American, 5% are Asian, there is 1 European, and none are Italian. Why? Because we stopped. Do we not know how to do it? Probably because to do something important, something big, you first need to dream it. And the one who dreams it is the one with an entrepreneurial mindset. And so having an entrepreneurial mindset doesn't mean being an entrepreneur. It means facing life with the fifth eye, which is the most important of all. Because the fifth eye is a simple eye that stands for you, meaning don't leave the helm in others' hands anymore, but take it yourself. Become the protagonist of change. In my own small way, I am doing it because my grandfather, with only a third grade education, always told me one thing: to change the world. It seems impossible, but the only way I know to do it is by setting an example, by doing things. And then, how can I finish a talk that discusses genetics, technology, innovation, robots, artificial intelligence, the metaverse, without saying that there is actually something much more important that we still do, that we forget, but that science and technology have not only been unable to replicate, but have not even been able to explain. Because you see, one day your dad met your mom. That day, inside the body of that perfect engineer called a woman, another life was created, which in 9 months, I was in a hurry in 7, became so perfect that it had the courage to come into the world. And when this little thing comes into the world, what does science still call this phenomenon in 2022? The miracle of life. And so, without false rhetoric, let's ask ourselves a question. If we are capable of performing this miracle, do you think we are not capable of solving a problem like the pandemic or an ensuing economic crisis? Einstein said that everything the human mind can think of, it can also achieve. It's just a matter of time and understanding how. But here's the catch. The how is not understood by those people who wake up in the morning feeling sorry for themselves, looking for problems, criticizing everything, criticizing everyone, people complaining. These are the troublemakers that life places beside us, and they make noise. But let's remember that on the same morning, there is a significantly larger number of people who wake up in silence, roll up their sleeves, and try to find a solution to at least one of those problems. And those people belong to only one category: those who do a job out of passion. And the great news is that a job done out of passion can never be done by a robot, can never be done by a machine. And so only those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world actually do change it. And beyond the boundary, only and solely the human being will take us. Thank you.